Joining me now for more on the day's political news for the best political analysts in the country, we're joined by Democratic strategist and CNN contributor Robert Zimmerman, New York Daily News columnist and CNN contributor Errol Louis. And Errol is also the host of the morning show on WWRL radio in New York City. Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist for the New York Daily News, CNN contributor Michael Goodwin. And we're also joined by James Taranto, editor of OpinionJournal.com. And thank you all for being here. I think the absolute must discuss for tonight is Obama and Hillary. And Robert, we're hearing all sorts of things. What's your take on
heard? Look, obviously, a meeting took place, as we all know, on yesterday, Thursday, and there's an old rule about this process: those who know don't talk, and those who talk don't know. So there's a lot of obviously, they're clearly having a very serious dialogue, and I'm not a spokesperson for either one of them. But of course, if the speculation is true and she's interested and he's interested in her in the role of Secretary of State, she'd be extraordinary. And I think there's two things to look at quickly. One is she certainly is, it speaks to his strength as a leader, that he can have around him individuals of strength and very much follow that mode of the Lincoln mode of strong leadership around him, like Rahm Emanuel as chief of staff, like Joe Biden for vice president. And she also brings international credibility to his message. And he'll be focused on the domestic agenda the first term.
I guess the operative question is, would it appeal to her? Here's what she had to say to the press today.
I'm not going to speculate or address anything about the president-elect's incoming administration. And I'm going to respect his process. And any inquiries should be directed to his transition team.
Okay, that's a predictable. Michael, you're snorkeling over there. What are her odds of taking it, of liking it? What do you think?
Well, look, I think just back to one thing Robert said about strong people surrounding him. I mean, obviously that's somewhat true for her, but it's also the advantage that he gets her out of the country. He kind of puts her on a plane and says, keep going, keep moving, don't land. Look, it's a very important job. I mean, the State Department is the first among equals in the cabinet, and it's certainly the most important pick for him in that capacity. I think it is appealing to both of them in some ways. There are also some obvious drawbacks. So I think that's for them to negotiate. Yeah. I think, frankly, she's a better choice than some of the others we've heard.
Well, we've also heard that Obama was meeting with Richardson today. And so, you know, obviously a lot of discussion about that. What does it do to her political aspirations if she takes it? Errol?
Well, I interpret it in part as meaning that maybe she's not interested in another run at president. If you were assuming that your administration will be in there for 8 years, well, she'd be talking about, she'd be, what, 69, 70 years old by the time it came around again? I would think of her as wanting to do what she's always done, which is wanting to be at the center of world affairs. And in this case, she could do it in a singular kind of a way. Instead of being one of 100, you know, an extraordinary one of 100, but to be the only Secretary of State, to really go around and deal with heads of state. It's like being a deputy president in a lot of ways. Very prestigious. I could see it appealing to her very much.
James, thoughts on this?
Well, Mrs. Clinton pretty much can't run for president until 2016 anyway, because it's unlikely she will take on President Obama in 2012, and it's unlikely that he will not seek re-election. So this may actually be the most sensible course for her, assuming that he's interested in giving her the job, and if she wants a high-profile position. I would also note, Michael mentioned that it would get her out of the country. It would also put her in the line of succession.
That's exactly right. All right.
It's also worth remembering, regardless, you know, there are people like Senator John Kerry, who's a very strong contender and very respected for that position, and we have a number of great choices. Obviously, she stands out, but it's also with John Kerry too. Is also a candidate worth looking at.
I'm sure.
I think Kerry would be an awful choice. I think our friend Zimmerman has better diplomatic skills than John Kerry.
That's because you've not seen John Kerry in action, and his leadership uniting the Senate to hold the Iraqi government accountable was a major breakthrough. And he introduced a program to fight terrorism, which he took heat for, but now even the Bush administration's was the right strategy. So I think John Kerry deserves a lot of credit and respect. Could end up chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, but clearly he's going to play a significant role, but Hillary Clinton has a unique position here.
Well, I do respect your diplomatic skills too, Robert. We'll be back with more of our panel in just a moment. Also still ahead, the Space Shuttle Endeavour preparing for liftoff just a few minutes from now. We're live from Cape Canaveral. Stay with us. We are back with Robert Zimmerman, Errol Louis, Michael Goodwin, and James Taranto. President-elect Obama is, taking job applications at this point. Apparently, there's a very extensive 63-question questionnaire about whether a person has a Facebook, keeps a diary, has ever sent embarrassing text messages. Let me just bring up one question that we found on this, which is really intriguing. Do you or any of your members of your immediate family own a gun? And if so, provide complete ownership and registration information. Has the registration ever lapsed? Please also describe how and by whom it is used and whether it has been the cause of any personal injuries or property damage. Kind of a weird question. And there's so many questions. James, thoughts on this job application questionnaire?
Well, in part, the incoming administration is just trying to be prudent. There's a whole section in this questionnaire, for example, on domestic employees, nannies and gardeners and that sort of thing. Have you ever employed them? Did you pay your taxes? Were they in the country legally? And this is obviously trying to prevent the kind of thing that happened to Kimba Wood and Zoe Barrett and Linda Chavez in previous administrations. But some of this stuff gets really invasive. One of them asks you to list any email or text message you've ever sent that might possibly be embarrassing. I mean, if that's really a disqualification, it disqualifies just about everyone. And of course, there's no right to a top-level appointment in the administration, so this is perfectly constitutional, but it does kind of make you wonder if they really believe in the right to privacy.
Errol, do you think it's invasive or prudent?
Oh, it's absolutely invasive, and it's paranoid, too. I mean, they list all of these scenarios. I mean, even like some of the ones that you described. I mean, clearly they're thinking about something as probably a case involving a local official in which the discharge of a weapon or the not properly registering it resulted in a negative headline. Now, let's keep in mind, this is a campaign that got extraordinarily good press, was very secretive. You never, no drama Obama, they called it, So I guess they're trying to extend that. I don't know, though, if you can reasonably expect 8,000 senior members of a federal administration to really adhere to that.
Well, the real issue that James raised is, are any of these issues particularly disqualifying? And the objective is going to be for the transition team to evaluate this questionnaire and see what exactly is a disqualifying factor. I think the questions are perfectly legitimate to ask. And I think especially in the new age of our technology, there are lots of areas where people have to show better discretion and better judgment. But the issue is whether any of these issues will be, in fact, disqualifiers.
One other interesting point, there's
James.
no question on the questionnaire about drug use. So apparently you can work for the Obama administration even if you've never used drugs.
I see you really looked at this questionnaire quite carefully, James.
There are laws that address that, James.
All right, let me move on to something more interesting and perhaps more important, and that's the big bailout, the financial bailout. The Treasury Inspector General says the bailout program's a mess. There's no proper oversight. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I thought Hank Paulson's actions this week, it's like a slow-motion time bomb. When he said, I'm not going to do the thing that I said I had to have the money to do originally, and that I've known for some time I wasn't going to do it, I mean, I couldn't believe it myself. And I think a lot of members of Congress are saying, wait a minute. Why did we rush this thing through? I mean, Paulson, Bernanke, Bush, they all sold it as the silver bullet. And now it's not going to happen at all, this idea of buying the bad assets. So clearly I think that it's kind of an ad hoc, flying by the seat of their pants idea. And now comes GM, which I think is a much more complicated situation.
About to be taken up on Monday, $25 billion rescue package of emergency loans. Yeah. What's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, I don't think the car makers have made a good case for why they should be bailed out in this environment. I mean, clearly they're in trouble. The question is giving them money going to get them out of trouble, or is it just going to sustain something that's not viable anymore?
In fact, the head of GM's response was virtually arrogant and offensive in terms of his response to the whole issue of the bailout and his insistence upon keeping his position, despite the way they are conducting their business. But, one of the issues that was so striking this week was the fact that Congress really dropped the ball in terms of their oversight role and in terms of their congressional authority. I got to give a lot of credit to Lou Dobbs for calling it.
Lou has called this all the way along, and we do have to give him credit for that. I'm sorry we don't have time. Errol Louis, James Taranto, Robert Zimmerman, Michael Goodwin, thank you all for being here. Coming up at the top of the hour, Campbell Brown, no bias, no bull.